Yeah. Welcome to the episode. Welcome. All right, welcome to the FAQ of Design Thinking 101. This is where we answer questions from people who participated in the Design Thinking 101 masterclasses, and specifically around journey mapping. So a lot of questions are about the mapping itself. So the mechanics of it. So how do we know? So when journey mapping, we talk about stages, and then below the stage, so in general, you have like a before, during, and after, in a very simplified journey map. And then there's a different swim lane. So it can be the emotional journey, it can be the touch points, the channels people use. It can be, anything really you want to know in these different stages. And I always call them chapters, although, that there's no, I don't think in literature you find stages as chapters, but like chapters, because then it says like, this is the story, these are the chapters,
Yes.
and in each chapter there's a lot going on, and what is going on, what do you want to know, what story are you going to create and write or discover. So first thing is, how do we know which questions we want to put there? What do we put in the swim lanes?
Dimensions. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do we how big can a journey map be, or how small, or specific? And then the I think one of the questions that I think is maybe most important is around what I call process maps and this journey map. So your sales cycle, for instance, and the journey map. So a lot of what I would call process maps, because and these are like maps that are internal processes that you then kind of stick on your customer. It's an inside out kind of way of thinking, inside of an outside in way of thinking. So that would be my take on what's the difference between the map I have in the office. They call it journey map, but it's actually a process map, because it's you invented this journey, and then you say, where's my customer in the journey that we invented? And where a journey map says, what do our customers actually do, and the order, the order they use our services, and what they do in the at the same time as well. It can be totally different than we thought they would do it, and they would not use the same words for it. So all the language is your customer's language and not your language. So you're not in a awareness stage or in a purchase stage as a customer. You would never call it that. So again, it's this inside out thinking, outside in thinking. So what's your take on that? So there's the last one around process maps, journey maps. Is it the same? Is it different? Is it can you mix it? Because I see it often that there's some confusion there.
No, I mean, it makes sense. And the confusion is usually related to the fact that we usually start as a company mapping out our own processes as a company. And then we're trying to put in the customer and, try to make that fit, or, and of course, then it usually fits. So you always find these fantastic journey maps that, are perfect. Oh, it's amazing. There's no real problems because everything works just fine. So if you start with your process map, then, I mean, in a process that is quite sensitive to biases, for sure that you're biased. So don't start with your process map. If you want to find insights and you want to really make improvements, then you start by looking at it from the perspective of your customers or of some other stakeholder.
Yeah, exactly. Some other, because it's basically you can everybody has a story, and you can map all stories. But so then, because then you get to so then all of a sudden I have an empty map, and there are no stages that I pre-filled, and there are no. So how then do I know what do I put in these swim lanes?
Yeah, I think it starts. So I think first of all, you want to kind of figure out the scope of that journey, and so I think one of the most difficult parts of custom journey mapping is is seeing this tool as a sense making tool. It's making sense of your data, and constantly going back and forth between, what do we know about our persona, because persona is your leading figure in identifying the process, and constantly discovering that there are certain areas where you have no data, so which helps you. Okay, we need to find more data, or we need to understand better what happens here. And so it's a
Right.
it's a constant sense making process. And the way you design the swim lanes is your intention. So what do you want to find out? What are the different criteria that you want to figure out for the map?
Yeah,
As
because your persona is a collection of. I always say it's actually a pattern of behavior within a
Yes,
certain context. So
yes,
so you
yeah,
you map a pattern of behavior, but
yeah,
it is something that you're discovering while you're doing this, and
exactly,
you're gathering this
yeah,
data.
yeah,
And so it's not a, and this is the trick, which
yeah,
I know I remember being totally puzzled by
yeah,
this, that
yeah.
it is not a real person, a
No,
one person. It could, I mean, you could make journeys of a person, but then you start combining these.
yeah,
I mean, you can make a journey of one. I mean, I've
yeah,
done lots of interviews
yeah,
using the journey map as a kind of a nice framework to have the interview. So I would
yeah,
do journey mapping with people in the studio,
yeah,
and they would then basically either I would help them make their own map, or I would interview them, and I
yeah,
would kind of create a story, which is wonderful because they've
yeah,
never seen their life story
yeah,
or their whatever story we're mapping that
yeah,
way. So they're like, oh yeah, that's really
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Yes, this is where it went all sour. Oh
yeah,
no, here I was
yeah,
okay. And it's
yeah,
it's a wonderful way of helping you do your interviews. But then obviously, while you're doing more, you start discovering these patterns, and then they become personas,
yeah,
and you start to having different patterns. But um, one person could have several emotions in a map,
absolutely.
because it depends on what happens. So
Yeah,
if it all goes well in one stage, they're happy in that stage.
yeah,
If it didn't go well, they weren't happy.
yeah.
And so how do you then do you can't put two emotions in a journey map. And I disappeared. Okay, so
Yeah,
so you so what I was saying, I mean, you cannot. I think you cannot put two different emotions
yeah,
in. So if you have the swim lane,
yeah,
the emotional journey,
yeah,
you can't put two emotions there because it makes it very complicated.
yeah.
So you might want to make two different maps, saying, well,
Yes.
in this instance,
Yeah,
this is the way. But I because before you start making like hundreds of journey maps,
mm,
with all the different options, because I
yeah,
think that is too much. It's more, the trick here again is, what is interesting to discover. Is it
exactly.
interesting to discover that it goes wrong? You make that happen in your journey map. And
Yeah,
so again, it's not a one person experience.
yeah,
These are it's you put in options that you want to kind of dig into. You want to really start
yeah,
understanding what's going on here.
yes,
And what if this happens, because
yeah,
it's based on real research, so it
yeah,
really happened,
yeah,
and it happened to multiple people, and you see these patterns of behavior. And
yeah.
then the other swim lanes are, they're also exactly the same. It's like, you know it is.
But I think
um
it's also very important to describe specifically what type of emotions you're talking about. So I think it's not just a matter of making a graphic representation of positive, negative emotions, because that doesn't. I mean, of course, it helps, but it doesn't tell you much about the emotion. So it doesn't give you much and in
no, exactly.
hand to design solutions for. So you want to be very specific about what
Right.
these types of emotions are.
Exactly.
Uh, and again, I think, and this is also the kind of the counterintuitive part. Intuitive part. It's an interpretation. You're interpreting your data, and you're interpreting your data, and you're projecting that onto a map. And that process of interpreting and projecting is not is something that is continuous. So
Yeah.
it's a sense making process.
Right. Exactly. So it's not, you're never done,
No.
because that's the other thing, is like, okay, finish my map. am I
Yeah.
done now for the next, what, 5 years?
Yeah.
No, it's a continuous process, because it
Yeah.
is about gathering data. And just imagine, for instance, that that gives you an insight
Yeah.
that you then can act upon. You say, hey, we're going to
Yeah.
change something in the way we deliver
Yeah.
whatever this service. And then you have to go back again and say, what happens
Yeah.
now? Because
Yeah.
what's the consequence of this? And
Yeah.
you can do that in a prototyping way, or what, a
Exactly.
pilot, for instance.
Yeah.
First,
Yeah.
start small. Never,
Yeah.
always start small. And
Yeah.
then you start going back again to
Exactly.
discovery, saying,
Yeah.
okay, so now what's happening? Because and one thing I would like to kind of share with journey mapping, when we talk about what is a good journey map, and what do you put in these swim lanes. First of all, I think these swim lanes are just questions that you have, and they should be
Exactly.
relevant,
Yeah.
and it can be anything. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Don't be too
Yeah.
kind of careful about it. It's
No.
not ticking the box.
Yeah.
Design thinking and service design and all these creative methodologies are all about you taking responsibility for
Yeah.
the tool. So
Yeah.
it's your tool.
Exactly.
Design your journey map, and the designing of the journey map is
Yeah.
almost just as crucial as using the journey map, because you
So
start thinking about, what do I want to know? So there is no
exactly.
standard answer. It is about, you have to do the work, and to think about what, and then you can
Yeah.
also discover new things, like, hey, wait a minute, or just try something. I did a journey map research using journey maps some time ago, where after a while, I don't know why it was relevant, but it was relevant to just say, I want to know whether they use an iPad in these stages or not. So we just wrote
Yeah.
on iPad, and we're like,
Yeah.
yes, and how, and why,
Yeah.
and no, yes, no, because we wanted to know whether they engage with that kind of
Yeah.
technology, and it was a retail journey.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it doesn't matter. It's all good.
Yeah.
It's about being totally um, the owner of the tool.
Yeah. And it's good to, I mean, of course, you can revisit all kinds of standard tools, but I think it's really the process of designing it yourself, because that process is also, it's a little bit like formulating your research questions. So what do we want to know? And that is how you define your swim lanes, and it helps you to overcome the danger of just working on assumptions. So if there's an empty something where you have, this is what you want to know, but you don't have the data, then you know, okay, we need to find more insights about this specific element of the journey.
Yeah, and so and you can zoom out and zoom in. What I mean is that
Yes.
I always like to kind of ask myself continuously, is there something before the first stage that is interesting? And
Yeah.
and here, maybe going
No.
back to one of the previous questions that we answered about innovation and improvement. When you're innovating, you kind of want to kind of ask that a lot, like, what
Yeah.
happens before, what happens before,
Yeah.
what happens before.
Exactly.
But sometimes you want to go and zoom in. You want to say, but I
Yeah.
want to know what happens just at this moment when people are in the like the fitting room of this shop, and I'm going
Exactly.
to zoom in there, because that's
Yeah.
really interesting to know.
Yeah.
And then you can, because it is so, one of the most powerful things that I've discovered while using journey maps over the last decade is that often what it shows you is how to prevent certain things from happening, where we often try to solve a problem
Yeah.
right there when it occurs. The journey map shows you this holistic view that
Yeah.
that helps you show kind of show you that moment in time, that if you would give people information before, or
Exactly.
if you use
Yeah.
it, if you change this journey before that incident happens,
Yeah.
it never happens. So
Yeah.
but the solution is usually not where the, so if you're looking at pain points and customer needs and unmet need,
Yeah.
usually you don't deliver it right there where that unmet need takes
Exactly.
place, where they find that barrier. It's actually way before often, and then
Exactly.
it just never happens. So you
Yeah.
really want to know, if you once you put something in place,
Yeah.
uh, what happened, because there's consequences of you changing that
Yeah.
journey of people, and it's not and you sometimes just don't know.
No.
But again, what I really liked about it is that it all of a sudden it shows you, and this, I think it happened like probably 100% of the time, that then all of a sudden you start seeing, like, wait a minute, if we change it way before they actually come to this stage where they have a problem, that never happens. Um, example is the luggage drop off or the check in on an airport, right? So
Yeah.
you used to go waiting line to check in, and now you can check in online. And that whole stage for a lot of people just disappeared. There is no
Yeah.
check in at a counter anymore because you do it at home.
Yeah.
You don't do that anymore. So you kind of so the part of the journey. So if you want to improve that part of the journey, you're going to see whether that person behind the counter is nicer, if they speed up that process. But what they in this journey, they just said, boop, it's gone. The whole
Yeah.
thing doesn't. The whole stage is gone.
Yeah.
There's no checking at the
Yeah.
counter anymore, right? So again, if you have to zoom out to, if you zoom in, you're just improving the counter experience. Then you'll never find that moment where you say, actually, we're going to skip that whole part of the journey,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's the beauty of journey mapping.
Yeah.
If you
And I think
find,
it's always, so that means that there are two things actually. One is that so your focus is both in a horizontal, so the process, so what happens before, what happens after, and at the same time it's zooming in and zooming out. So it's this kind of three-dimensional movement that you're making to make sense of the situation is a very
yeah,
important element of journey mapping.
yeah,
But of course, also when you do an intervention, also realize what is the impact or what's the emotional impact. So we've solved something here, but you could say, okay, now we remove this lady at the counter, which saves us a lot of money. What is the impact on the emotional relationship between us as a company and our customers, because maybe there's no relationship anymore, because so that also all
well,
these
yeah,
kind of things.
exactly. Yeah, like supermarkets now,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you do your own kind of
Yeah.
scanning of your products and do
Yeah.
it all. Pay.
Yeah.
So there's actually just a lady or a gentleman guiding you, helping you with the
Yeah.
process, teaching you how to do their job, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
always a little bit sad, to be honest. Sometimes you're like,
Well, it can be good. I mean, if but you have to be careful not to commoditize everything you do, and at some point also
good
think
point.
about what are interventions that we can actually
Well,
make
exactly.
emotional value.
Yeah,
It's also
exactly.
value.
Well, it's an interesting point because we're not going to talk too much about that, but just to kind of because in the supermarket they now you're skipping this moment that you go
Yeah.
to the cashier and
Yeah.
so and you pay them. There's a
Yeah.
person behind the
Yeah.
counter, and then all of a sudden you're scanning your own products, and you're doing the whole process
Yeah.
yourself. The
Yeah.
only time you have an interaction with one of the staff is when they check. So they do this.
It's a negative. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a negative. It's like they do it really nicely, but basically you feel like, oh, something.
Yeah.
Oh, what if I forgot?
Exactly.
What if I forgot one of those things,
Yeah.
because I'm not that clear headed all the time. So right. So
Are
I
you?
like, yeah, so I hate doing that. I want to get out of
Yeah.
that place. I'm always like,
Exactly.
oh, I forgot to do something,
Yeah.
didn't I? It hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen to me. And then so that's my feeling,
Yeah.
right? So that's not a positive. So how do they then? So anyway, the journey totally changed in that sense. All of a sudden, there's this moment that I do this job myself, which
Yeah.
I like. I don't mind.
No.
It's not. I'm okay with it. I'm not really sure what the benefit is for me exactly, but I'm not in the line anymore quite often. So
Exactly.
I see the speed. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to get out. So
Mm.
but anyway, and I understand the benefit for the organization because they
Of
don't have
course.
to pay this many people. But all of a sudden, there is a negative. There's a, like, I could be checked.
Yeah.
Like if did I do
Yeah.
my job right?
Yeah, and not only that, but it's also, I think, especially now. I mean, all these retailers have also, what is the social impact on our cities, on people with low education? Their last resort is usually working in these retail. What are the costs of these interventions? Maybe it saves us a few bucks, but does it really, save other things? I think you also have to think about those things,
Yeah.
because these costs are turned on someone else.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Thank you very much. for helping me answer these questions. And see you next time.
All right. Bye bye.